Hello everyone, thought I would just make a quick video here to update you all on the sort of recent goings on with a couple of things, TFM first officer and 2020, etc. I really haven't had time to make a podcast that's sort of an hour long with full details of everything, but there's been quite a bit going on. It's calmed down somewhat over the past few weeks, but there's been a few key updates which I thought would be interesting to share and discuss a little bit. So I guess we'll start with TFM. So as you all know, TFM got a couple of bigger updates recently. Let's have a look here at the changelogs, which I have pulled up that I thought would be particularly interesting to look at. So here you can see, if you go to the downloads page of Talking Flight Monitor, I would recommend to do every now and again. You can see the change logs which they've started putting up here, which are particularly useful. And you can also see the known issues here, which is also useful if you're having problems. So the 22.1 or V2213 it was obviously released, I believe was at the start of this year, or perhaps the end of last year, but this was quite a big update. So let's go through this here. So it initially talks about the version scheme, which is just talking about the way that it's laid out, sort of like for those who are familiar with NVDA version scheme, in terms of the numbers that they use, the version schemes will be similar. Settings now persist across version changes, so you shouldn't have to update your settings when you do an update. They should remain as they were. So you've got the discussion here of the fact that TFM is now a system tray icon, and so you've basically got various hotkeys that you can see here. So to access the settings dialog, A2A manager, which is currently obsolete, but yeah, aircraft profiles are also obsolete at the moment. Visit website, report issue, etc. So they all have hotkeys that you can access. And the system tray also has a context menu, which is worth noting as well, so you can use that if you need to get to some of these, which is of course just the context menu key basically. So then it lists what options the context menu has, which is all the various options that you would have got from the menu previously. So useful there. So PMDG has the ability to load offsets based on a specific model. The 777 had the hydraulics panel. Various offsets have been added for the triple. Talking about if you want the display and FS panel knobs to be included, which I'm guessing are more visual sort of stuff, your brightness, then drop them a line about that. Personally, not too bothered about that, but it's cool. So the TFM now knows which aircraft model you're in for the 777, i.e. 200LR, 300ER, etc., which is also cool. I don't believe that's really got much functionality UI yet, but it could be useful for, say, your freighters, because obviously they do have some slight differences. So the 777 will now announce when the perf init page is complete, because we didn't have an idea of that before, since you don't have to use the usual execute method like you would in the 7.3. 777 reads the speed brake on demand, and the MCP box with the flight directors and autopilots. I believe they're looking to do more with that, especially the flight directors, so that you'll be able to use a hotkey to get data from the flight directors to tell you where the flight director is asking you to go, so that you'll be able to hopefully do some manual flying. That will be very useful. So there was another update released after that. That was a pretty distant update in the past, but I thought I'd just go through that. So let's have a look at this. V2214 was released. This was actually relatively recently. So there's a setting to disable and enable the start up and shut down sound. The send to tray option's been removed because it's already in a system tray application. And TFM should no longer crash during simulator shutdown. It should remain open. So you can essentially leave it open if you wish and just use it again when you reload the sim. But it won't crash at least. Known issues. It just says there's no keyboard command to restart TFM restarted from the notification tray icon or the system tray icon. So that's the changelog. Another issue that probably should be here but isn't, but just so people are aware, is that the settings dialog does not seem to be saving your settings properly when you actually make changes. So although your previous settings should persist across version updates, if you try and make changes to those settings within the dialog, you may have issues. So just be aware of that. They are looking at changing it to a INI based settings system, but for now they may not save. If you really need to change things, you can do it in the TFM config file, which is in the main TFM folder, and edit the strings of text there. A lot of things might say true or false, which is obviously, you know, an acronym for being off or on or whatever. So you can change things there. Just be mindful that you've got to make sure everything is as it was correctly. You can't go deleting characters or whatever out of there. So it's a little bit tricky, but if you need to change things, that's how I would do it personally. But I believe it is being looked into. So that's TFM. They're also working on adding more panels to aircraft. Jason has added the IRS and the fuel panel to the 777, which will come in a future update, probably relatively soon, I would imagine, but there's no date for that. Which brings me to First Officer Pro, because there's been some updates. So I'm going to go through this changelog here as well. So this is for P3D, the next version, which is for 2020, has also been updated with the ability to program the CDUs of the fly-by-wire A320neo and the Aerosoft CRJ, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is the P3D changelog. So 250, he's changed the graphical user interface basically to make it similar to the next version. Changed activating the no smoking sign, no longer activates mute, so he's changed the mute mic switch to control M, that's control mic. Removed the voice checklist button. When voice is active, voice checklist will automatically activate. So basically, if you've got the mic unmuted, you will be expected to perform the items via voice through the checklist. If it's muted, then the first officer will just run through it as if you had the VCHK button pressed. Removed Copilot set IRS option. This is now included in the CDU option, which he is called, let's see, what has he called it? Copilot PRGM FMC option, so program FMC, that's what he's called it. Added ability to automatically download the last SimBrief flight plan, which is very cool. It will pre-populate most of your briefing. Copilot now programs 95% of the FMC. You must download a SimBrief flight plan. This feature is only available for PMDG aircraft. Others may be considered. All you need to do is program the runways, SIDS and stars. There are a few other bits that it doesn't quite get right, but no, okay. Added ability to repeat checklist calls. Doesn't say how you do that. Perhaps you just say repeat. Added ability to automatically connect FSFO to your flight sim. Changed recompiled.net. Updated FSUIPC DLL, etc. updated manual, please read. So that's been updated as well. He then made some YouTube videos which are for the next version, but maybe have some help as well to watch for the P2D version, because some of the changes are very similar. So if you want to get an idea of that, he's probably got 2 or 3 videos up of that. 251, he says fixed SimBrief ID will not allow more than 4 characters. That's something to note. So when you're doing your SimBrief integration and you give FSFO your SimBrief data, you'll need to give your ID, not your username. So that's something that's easy to get tripped up with. And then version 252 was released. It just says fixed when using the program FMS option, the Copilot was entering the wrong block fuel. So those are the updates for P3D, relatively similar things for 2020. A few more updates have been issued for 2020 simply because there's more bugs, because obviously it's a new sim and a whole new platform. So it's obviously really good that the CDU has been made a priority, and I think it will help new people to get an idea of how to program the CDU when you can see it program most of it. As I said, you have to do the runway, SIDS and stars, but it will do, the majority of things. This is not to say that in 2020 or P3D you can have it program it on the fly, so you can't use voice commands to change things in the CDU. You still have to do your SID and runway on the ground, and there's you can't change things on the fly once you're airborne, basically. So it wouldn't really work, say, if someone's thinking, okay, this is great, I can use this to to operate the fly-by-wire or the Aerosoft CRJ on a full flight in 2020. It wouldn't work like that. Neither would it work with the PMDG in P3D. You would still have to use TFM to operate it properly in flight, or with ATC where you'd be changing things. But nevertheless, it's a really good step forward, and perhaps these voice commands and changing things on the fly will come, and more aircraft will also come, which is really exciting. There are some things that we are not so pleased about, which several of us have emailed him. One of them being that this combining of the IRS and the FMC option was done, because the problem with that is that you end up where if you don't have access to the IRS, you cannot align it if you want to program the CDU. So essentially that is something for aircraft like the 747 or the 777, where TFM doesn't have the IRS yet. And so if you uncheck the program FMS box in First Officer, he will not do the CDU. And obviously it's great he can do the CDU, but I encourage people to continue using the manual programming method as well, because otherwise you kind of lose those skills, and that's important. Flight sim should never be just another piece of software doing everything for you, so it's always good to do that as well. But if you do uncheck that option in the 747 and 777 currently, you will have problems because he's not going to do the IRS. As I just said, Jason has added the IRS panel to, or at least what we need of it at this point, to the 777. So you'll be able to press one button within that panel, I believe it is, and that will essentially perform the, aligning per se. Then you can go into the CDU and do your enter your position, etc., to complete the process. So that will greatly help when that is released for the 777. But just be aware, if you do uncheck that option and you are on 250 or higher, you won't be able to have it do the IRSs. So what we've asked for is for those checkboxes to be separated, but we'll have to see if he will do that. The other thing is the Control M thing with the voice unmuting and muting the mic. So obviously before, with no smoking, obviously it was a bit unrealistic to be using the no smoking, but the good thing about it was that TFM would report whether it was off or on, and you could also assign it to a joystick button. But with Control M, you won't be able to do that. It doesn't report whether it's off or on, and it also obviously can't be assigned to a joystick. So that's slightly unfortunate. And I would have preferred that he make it an option for you to maybe define a key, or to be honest, just left it as the no smoking sign. I was perfectly happy with that, but okay. The third thing that was an issue was the read-only. So it's quite a complicated explanation. The TFM devs and Andy have given a bit of discussion about basically what happened here, and I won't go into it all. And to be honest, I probably couldn't explain it very well. But the fact of the matter is, the screen reader no longer recognizes the box which shows what he's doing, the first officer, as a read-only. It no longer identifies it as a read-only element. So when you tab, you don't get that box. Now it is still there. You can access it probably two ways. One is you can use screen review, and if you screen review down to the bottom of the window, you'll be able to see the general text from that box. The second is to have it push that through Sim Connect, which has always been an option, one that we've never used, but you can have it do that. The issue with that is that when you get these kind of things that are on a timer, like the engine start or something where it has a countdown in seconds, it gets very spammy. So personally, I don't particularly like that solution, but it is a solution. The best solution will be for him to reverse it so that we are able to just tab to the read-only. Again, we've told him this, so hopefully he will do so. Either way, now we will have the IRS in the triple, and it's already, I believe, in the 7.3, of course, which is probably the most complete one. Still the TFM has the 7.3, so it's not such a big problem, and you can definitely use the update. You can also remain on 2.4.0. There's no sort of forced update on you. It will only update if you actually check for updates. So in that way, and download it and install it. So in that way, you kind of have a choice whether you want to be doing the IRSs manually and doing the CDU manually, or whether you think, yeah, this is great, let's have it do the CDU. It is very nice that it will fill out most of your briefing with the SimBrief flight plan. That does, of course, save quite a bit of time, but like every update, it has its pros and cons, and this definitely does still have drawbacks that we hope you'll fix. So that is pretty much it on that front. In terms of the update front, I will also say that I've seen that FS Tramp has received some updates. So that isn't abandonware as we had thought, but that's been updated a few times, but nothing of real interest. I looked through the changelogs, and they're just visual changes or minor bug fixes. There's nothing particularly of interest that we were hoping for. So the final word I'm going to put in is on 2020, because I know there's been some more discussion on it, and I did put out a lengthy tweet about this a few weeks ago, and I'm just going to pretty much read through it here. There is going to be a sim update, I believe, on the 1st of March. I haven't seen any discussion saying that they're going to implement some sort of major accessibility changes, but you never know. It could happen, I guess, but they've had our feedback since last summer, so it would definitely be long overdue if they did, but we'll have to see. But anyway, I'm just going to read through this, because this was pretty well what I was, this hasn't changed all of what I put here. So it says, recently there have been some statements with regard to FS 2020, with some people seeming to state that there are a group of people who believe in it in the community and a group of people who do not. So some of this is can be my opinion, but I will just say, for those who want completely factual evidence, and from my point of view, anything you hear from other people on other people's channels, on other people's videos or streams, do not reflect my views at all. It may reflect what they think other people assume, or it might reflect their views, but it doesn't reflect my personal views on this. If it's not on here or say on the podcast, then it's not my personal view. But this is my personal view with regard to what I put on the rest of this post. So this idea that there are believers and non-believers in a flight simulator is ridiculous and unfounded. I've never dismissed FS 2020 and want it to play a role in our community's future. I believe it will do eventually. Of course, I dismissed FS 2020 in the beginning at the moment of its release. Why? Because after much PR, there was no accessibility. Of course, I was frustrated when Microsoft made many social media statements about the wonderful accessibility in the sim after Sim Update 5, when many of the concepts and promises had not been met at all. These promises have still not been met, and we were strung along for months, such as at the end of last year, and we were promised an accessibility team was on the horizon, to which some of us had already signed up before the individual organising it left and we were back to square one. So the accessibility was obviously released in, I think it was Sim Update 5, and there's been some minor fixes to it of late, or sort of, there's been the odd thing that we could point to, but nothing that has really fixed the core issues with it. Throughout all of this, I've never once stated that the sim does not have potential. The soundscape is amazing, especially outside the aircraft with the airports and with the engines. Although I will repeat my opinion that the inside sounds pale in comparison to PMDG from my experience, which you only need to watch some videos and you'll hear that. The inside sounds of the default aircraft sound nothing like the PMDG, and PMDG is massively superior quality. Just have a listen. I will also repeat my opinion that the AI needs work and does not fly an aircraft, especially jets, in any way close to real life. So for props, it's fine. For jets, again, if you watch some videos, you'll see it comes in way too fast, 170, 180 knots, way too fast. Sometimes has to go around, puts the flaps out, gear down too early, and often very firm landing or bounce. It also doesn't hold altitude properly. It sits at the wrong cruising altitude, so you get constant ATC alerts, which is very annoying. Which I showed all this. I did a video on it months and months ago when the Sim Update came out. We did a video in the fly-by-wire. So loading up on a runway because the screen to choose a gate is inaccessible, and then pressing one button before the autopilot kicks in is not really a simulation of flight. It's more an experience of flight, and sometimes a botched flight at that. So you do not learn very much, basically, by just using the AI. And that's not to say it's not fun. Anyone can fly what they want, and I certainly have, but it's not really teaching you much about simulation of flight. So I wrote here, it takes no talent, no skill, and teaches little. Option screens in part remain inaccessible, as does the marketplace, as do the panels of aircraft. So all that talk about blind veterans was either misleading or just a bit of a lie. FS 2020 does have great scenery, yes, absolutely. For me as a totally blind individual, this means absolutely nothing. So for streams, it's kind of cool to have that great scenery. For me, watching a stream or flying with it, it makes no difference. So I'm going to fly a sim based on what I want, not based on what 3 people watching my stream say, and a lot of them are visually impaired anyway. So I'm afraid if I'm not enjoying it, then that's sort of my policy. If I'm not enjoying it, then other people won't. So I'm not going to force myself to fly 2020 for the just because of the great scenery, because guess what, I can't see it. The sim itself has much going for it. The free weather comes with it, so yeah, it's amazing. Relatively good ATC comes with it, that's also great. And of course that also comes with the FlightAware live flights data, which is really cool. It's great to sort of plane spot with this. And folks can get it on Xbox Game Pass, which makes it a cheaper solution. So if you've got Game Pass, there's no reason you can't check this out. It as long as your system can run it, it is at a pretty accessible point in terms of funds anyway. I note also that First Officer Pro has recently allowed for the programming of the CRJ and A320 Neo CDUs automatically by the First Officer. Great work from the developer. This still has a ways to go before we can change things on the fly, and there are still some adaptations he's hoping to make with regard to what we can program on the ground. So that's already what we've discussed. But it's another step forward. For now, though, the absolute realism remains with P3D and PMDG, and the ball remains in Microsoft's court since summer last year-ish. They've had an email from me and I'm sure others with detailed feedback on narration, and little has changed. A member of staff also used Talking Flight Monitor's recent public events to state that they were working with Talking Flight Monitor to create a layer of accessibility, a claim which to the best of my knowledge is false. There will be those who claim that TFM should jump ship and focus primarily on 2020. But a reminder that FS 2020 was never fully supported, and so any functions that do work are an extra positive. And a note that most functions do work anyway out of the box with TFM in 2020 purely by accident, but they do work. A lot of the instrument reading, etc. So it would be a lot of a worse experience with 2020 if we didn't have TFM providing that already. Right now, though, a fully transparent survey was completed a few months ago, and FS 2020 was found not to be a priority, and the devs, from my interpretation of TFM, are aiming to fix and add to P3D, PMDG and other projects before committing to FS 2020, which is still in its infancy, for a sim that has not yet proven its commitment to long-term and sustainable accessibility. I'm sure TFM may one day develop for both sims in years to come, but that remains to be seen and is in part down to Asobo. So you can see why I've made videos on 2020, and I'm very hopeful for its future in years to come. But I will not have my view twisted to mean something which it is not, simply because I choose to fly on vatsim with a certain type of realism in P3D currently, with FS 2020 for messing around on the side and some VFR. I would not recommend any blind individual pay the full price for 2020, but if you can get it on Game Pass to pick up, it's great fun for some flying, especially with general aviation. And then again, I go on just to say that I support everyone in flying whatever sim they want, but if you don't hear something from me, then it's not my opinion. And it's basically saying it's unfortunate when people try to turn this into one sim versus another and make snide remarks because someone has different opinions to themselves. Opinions have nuance and are not black and white. And then we go on to say the way forward for Microsoft and Asobo is clear. Address the feedback and fix the narration problems in the menus. Create a testing group to test out these changes and to implement further suggestions. A testing group that should be wide in its composition. Then perhaps they could turn to reading other panels and dialogues that may be more useful once we have loaded into the aircraft, all in consultation with a testing group. Perhaps most importantly, they need to fix the ways that they communicate with us. It should not be with one individual, and it certainly should not be on social media promoting accessibility that is by no means complete. And that's basically where I finished. That's on my Blind Flight Sim Twitter if you want to read that. I wrote that a few weeks ago and sort of published it as a little post, basically just to outline where I think we were at with 2020 and where I'm at, and to say, you know, look, this is my opinion, and if you want my opinion, you reference this, not somebody else's videos or sort of offhand remarks. So that's what I think about 2020 and where we're at with regard to that. And we will see what the next sim update brings. And like I say, if you can get it on Game Pass, it's a bit of fun to fly around with the AI, and you know, it all depends what you want from a sim. Now, with regard to the future, TFM is still working on adding things, of course, other than PMDG, and before the settings bug came up, which has now taken their attention, and also the IRS problem that was created by First Officer, which also, you know, took their attention so that they could add more of the IRS and other panels. There was talk about the Aerosoft 320 and 330, and that is looking very positive for the future. So obviously we know there will have to be some form of OCR on the CDU, but the SDK is something that they're able to access in greater depth than they had first thought, I believe. I know Andy was talking about that he had the I believe the 330, and that they were able to pull, for example, phases of flight to tell you when you were fully ready for taxi or takeoff, etc. So clearly the SDK is quite deep and hopefully relatively usable for them. By the sounds of it, it is. So positive news on the Aerosoft front. Looks like, you know, that could definitely be a very valid future project, which has already sort of begun in its infancy of being planned. So that's very exciting, and I really look forward to getting hold of those, because it looks like, from what we can tell at least, the 320 and 330 may use very similar SDKs, if not pretty much the same. So when we get one, we should be able to relatively quickly move things over to the other as well. Of course, with the 320 family, you get 4 models of aircraft: 318, 319, 320 and 321. So that is really exciting development. But other than that, I think that's going to be all. Can't think of anything else to add. I'm sure there will be more updates, so keep an eye on the forums. Oh, there are actually a few more things that I could add, but yes, the first officer forum is where he's posting things with regard to changelogs, and you can also see that he's got a bug tracker on there, and places for you to submit bugs rather than just the forums. So it's always worth taking a look. And similarly, that TFM downloads page is very useful. But it's also been announced that Cross the Pond will be held in April. I believe it was the 2nd of April, Saturday the 2nd of April. I'll have to double check that, but very early April, the first Saturday. So they are going to be shortly having people submit what airports they would like to use, to nominate, basically, and then you know, people will be able to eventually vote on those and then eventually get slots. So that will be exciting. So if you're available, that will be in April. And I'm sure there'll be a few BVI people doing that, as there will be for the March event, which BVI Virtual is doing. So if you're in the BVI Virtual group on WhatsApp, the Discord, if you're on BVI's Discord, you know, there's several places, but I've basically just put up a Google form as usual, which will be running for the rest of the month. So you can go and vote on that. As to when you'd like the event to be, and you know, what route we'll do, and then we'll do that as an airline, probably up on the team talk, and many people can participate as they like. As always, if you know you're not going to be doing it, then please don't vote. But if you think there's a chance you will, then go ahead and vote, and hopefully you'll get the day that you want, and we'll be able to enjoy that as a group. It's going to be in the US, but there's 4 routes that we could possibly do. One is a much longer one, so there's 1 flight, the other 3 are shorter, so there's 2. So you can go vote on that, and then probably early March I will close the form and report back on what the event will be, and then that's what we'll do for BVI Virtual on one of those days. All the days are weekend dates, of course, to try and make it more accessible to people. So that's what's going on in terms of events. But other than that, as I say, I can't think of anything else to add, other than to say that keeping an eye on those pages that I mentioned is the best way really to get updates. Obviously this channel, other channels you know, are around, and of course we have the BVI podcast, which I'm sure, you know, there may be another episode of, if not in February, then March, definitely, because I will be have a lot more time then. But as always, you know, real life comes first. We can't sit behind a computer. We have futures to plan, colleges to deal with, universities to deal with, and real life work to deal with. So there you go. Right, I hope you'll have a good rest of your day, and this has been informative. As always, the comments are open, so you can pop things in there if you have questions about any of the change logs or updates that I've put out in the video.